Joker 2, simply put, was a turnoff to mainstream audiences everywhere. And that's unfortunate because the movie actually is a masterpiece. I know, it's not the popular opinion. It saddens me that this movie has been panned so much by critics and casual moviegoers alike. To highlight the lack of popularity this movie holds, as of October 30th, about 3.5 weeks before the release of the film, it only made a little over $200 million off of a nearly $200 million budget. To put that into a little more perspective, Joker, back when it was released in 2019, grossed $1.079 billion off of only a $70 million budget. This clearly proves that bigger is not always better. It's evident that Warner Brothers, in producing this film, thought they could replicate the success of the first one. After all, movie making is a business. It really sucks that this movie bombed at the box office because it had something unique to say. I'm here to tell you exactly why I think this movie is a worthy sequel to Joker. I hope to either change some minds or, at the very least, bring some attention to the public that even if you don't like this movie, it's still a story worth being told. There was enough style, substance, and great performances in this movie that it should be looked at as what it aspired to be, a piece of art. One of the main themes of this movie is the reality of loneliness. Arthur Fleck is imprisoned and has really no one to talk to or tell his jokes to, besides the guards. If he can humor them, they give him a cigarette. As you might recall from the first movie, Arthur loves him a good ciggy. So the film starts out with a Looney Tunes-inspired cartoon that poetically speaks to the life of Arthur Fleck, both from this movie and the first one. It's simply called Me and My Shadow. It's cutesy, but speaks to something more. Arthur's deep desire to be known and loved by the public. Arthur was abused by his mother as a child. Instead of social services taking him away from her, he's placed right back into her home. Abuse at a young age can lead to things like deep depressions and needs for validation. Many people, after facing this kind of abuse at a young age, lead lives with deep-rooted mental health issues through no fault of their own. This is why Arthur is so obsessed with being the Joker. He was harmed and had really no confidence in himself, creating a need to act like someone else. In this case, the person he tries to be is Joker. Quite sad and depressing to think that the trauma Arthur endured at a young age led to this, but it is a stroke of genius by the creatives behind these movies. It adds so much depth and layers to the Joker, who, though a fan favorite, usually has no backstory for audiences to draw from in understanding his motives. The cartoon at the beginning of the film eases us into the controversial musical elements of the film. Look, I'm gonna keep it real here. Did this movie need to be a musical? Honestly, no. It did not need to be a musical. But when you're a director with some perhaps, misguided love for a character, you swing for the fences in hopes that your art is something that mirrors your deep love and admiration of the thing you're working with. Director Todd Phillips clearly has that deep love and admiration for the Joker, or he wouldn't have been selected for the first Joker, much less given a second chance to tell his story. If you'll do me a favor and recall the events of the first Joker when Arthur kills those men on the train, answer this for me. What does Arthur do after he kills them? He goes to the first place he can find, which, in this case, is a bathroom. And what does he do in that bathroom? He dances. Clearly, music is Arthur Fleck's escape from reality. So, of course, making this movie into a musical was seen to be the next logical step in the Joker and Arthur Fleck's journey. This version of Joker is shown to be out of touch with reality to the point where he imagines himself in a world where breaking out in song and dance is seen as normal. Clearly, it is not normal, but neither is he. He's fallen in love with women in the past that barely even knew he existed. This also stems from his early childhood trauma. Arthur has a deep desire to feel loved and accepted, which is why, in spite of how toxic it is, the Joker cult makes Arthur feel like a real star. He faces no guilt or remorse for his actions because those actions are the reasons why he is so famous in the first place. That takes us to the next theme of the movie, love and loss. Lady Gaga was clearly cast in this movie because it is a musical. She is a talented actress, but above all else, she is a performer. So naturally, she was the top choice to play Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn, or Lee as she goes by in this movie, isn't the same Harley we've come to know over the last 30-something years. While I'm here to say that this movie is a masterpiece, and stand on that, I will admit I didn't see why Harley had to go by Lee. Perhaps it was a way of showing early on that this would be a different take on the character. The Joker we see in these movies isn't the Joker that fights Batman. Just like the Harley Quinn in these movies, may wear a bit of excessive eye makeup, but she's not the real Harley Quinn that we've come to know from the comics and TV shows like Batman the Animated Series, which, fun fact, is where her character debuted. I will say Lady Gaga's Lee is a more realistic take on the character, for better or worse. I admire her character while at the same time despising her. Lady Gaga deserves her flowers for this magnificent layered performance. In her first meeting with Joker, she tells Arthur that he made her feel seen in the TV movie made about him that she says she's seen 20 times. Arthur immediately feels understood by Lee. Lee is the first person Arthur tells he killed his mother. Lee tells Arthur that she cares very little for her own mother, saying she wished she would have killed her. Lee even shares his same twisted sense of humor, telling a knock-knock joke with her dead dad being the punchline. She says all the right things for someone like Arthur to fall for her. After Arthur gets back to jail, he sings about how for once in his life, he's finally got someone who truly cares for him.
For once in my life, I have someone who needs me.
Little does he know, Lee is just there for the Joker. All of the protesters who are outside of the courthouse are either dressed up as Joker or have a sign about Joker. None of them are actually there for Arthur Fleck. Arthur thinks he's a hero when in all honesty, all people care about is his alter ego. This is an example of the sequel capitalizing off of the impact of the first movie. In the first Joker, Arthur tells Murray Franklin how society doesn't care about him or anyone else like him. In his eyes, you have to have a certain status to be cared about. This movie presents us with something that most movies of this genre don't, a courtroom drama. Sure, characters like Matt Murdock are in the courtroom quite often, but rarely do we get to see a villain on trial for the crimes that they've committed. It's something straight from a true crime movie or TV show. Arthur has quite a good case going for him. Which, if you're a Tom Holland fan like me, you've probably remembered seeing in Apple TV's The Crowded Room. We see Arthur on trial for his crimes, not his alter ego. It shows that while Joker has become the stuff of legend, Arthur is the one who has to pay for his actions. Arthur's lawyer was smart enough to know that he couldn't get off for his crimes. Pleading insanity was the only way to go. So even if he was found not guilty, Arthur would be in institutions for the rest of his life, which is something that Lee doesn't seem to wrap her mind around. Arthur, stupidly, fires his lawyer. He thinks he can get off from his crimes and face no repercussions for his actions. He clearly thinks that he has a power that he doesn't actually have. Seeing how much people love the Joker feeds his ego into thinking he's something bigger than who he really is. Remember, in the first movie he says he sees his life like a comedy. Little does he know that his actions have consequences. Someone as sick in the head as Arthur would see being in court for murder charges as a joke. It's proven that he thinks it's all one big joke when he decides to not put up any defense. A move which had me in my head scratching. Why, Arthur? Why? Arthur sees himself as above the law, almost like seeing himself as a rock star of sorts. Was a genius move by the writing team of this movie, because while it makes zero sense to the rational mind, we see just how far gone Arthur is by this point. After saying in the courtroom that he is tired of living a lie, Arthur says he wishes he could blow up his old life and start over. He admits to feeling miserable. By the end of the film, we know that Lee has lied about her home life, and she only saw the Joker TV movie maybe 4 or 5 times. So why did she lie? She got her master's degree in psychology, so clearly she knows all about the inner working of the brain. She is clearly obsessed with Joker, but cares very little for Arthur. He loses Lee, who says that all they ever were was a fantasy. She says they were never actually going to go anywhere, despite telling the press and anyone who would listen that they would build a mountain together. These dark moments show us how the world really would be if a Joker did exist. There's no fun going on in his life, just fantasies about better days. Musicals are usually campy, but in this case, it's just dark and empty. I think a lot of people couldn't sit with the pain of this movie knowing how true it all really was. Arthur, who we all grew to know and empathize with in the first movie, has a monster inside of him. He could have had his fair trial and gotten off with the murders he committed if he wasn't so obsessed with validation. His lawyer was presenting a strong case for him to plead insanity. It was all there for the taking, but love can be blinding to a person like Arthur, who saw so little of it during his life. Now I'm going to level with you here. If you got to near the end of the third act and felt like leaving or threatening to pull your hair out screaming, stop singing, then the ending probably wasn't earned or redeeming in your eyes. But it was earned. This film accomplishes all it set out to do. Arthur's legacy is set to live on, though he will not. He never really was the Joker. He was just someone coping with the darkness in his life. His life, despite his words, was never a comedy. He wasn't funny. No. His life was a tragedy. This movie, love it or hate it, definitely is a piece of art that has something to say. It is a unique study on the human condition and how far out of touch with reality some of us are when we are lost. I view it as a masterpiece. In fact, I've seen it in theaters twice, which is twice the amount a normal person would watch it. See, I can find the humor in its failure just as much as people who hated it. Until next time, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you're a pop culture buff like me and want more news, reactions, recaps, reviews, and essays, please like and subscribe to my channel.